you'll see bowling coming into more and more projects. We have the advantage that we work in with hotels and casinos and
Mhm.
movie theaters, and more bowling is a piece of that.
Awesome. Howard, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for joining us today. For the people who don't know about you or Pinnacle Entertainment Group, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you guys do.
Yeah, so to make a long story short, Pinnacle Entertainment Group is a boutique consulting firm taking many years. There's three of us, and we have about 100 years of operating experience between us.
Wow.
So taking that experience and leveraging it to help other people learn the family entertainment business.
Hmm.
Usually, most of our clients have an existing attraction, like a bowling center, and they want to
Hmm.
add a family entertainment element to an existing
Mm.
business.
So then you go and help them take it to that, or you help them run it, or what do you guys usually fit in the mix?
Yeah, we help them come up with the concept, exactly what components they're going to have, make sure, fit it to the space, do the business planning so we can give them an idea of what the economics are going to be, their costs and their expenses to run it and their profitability.
I see.
And then we help them get set up and then teach them how to operate that business.
Oh, wow. So you really kind of hold their hand through the whole transition.
Exactly, yeah. But we don't sell equipment or things like that. A lot of people who sell equipment say they consult, but it's hard to do both.
Right. Yeah.
And
You
be
might have a little
effective.
bit. Right. You might have a little bit of a bias,
Yeah.
as you're setting that up. Very cool. So I'd love to, we kind of see where you're at today. I'd love to rewind a little bit and maybe talk about some of this experience that you're referring to, that you have, 20 or more years, and then your two partners. Walk us through a little bit about kind of how that came to be and then how you use that today.
Yeah, so I grew up in the business, so I'm second generation. So my dad started managing an arcade in the 80s. And then as that company grew, he grew with the company. So as I was growing up, he was becoming a store manager, a regional manager, district manager, all the way up till ultimately being CEO. And that company went from having a handful of arcades to over 100
Oh,
and started building indoor large, 100,000 plus square foot family entertainment centers. So I grew up around that. And then when I was in high school was when we started Pinnacle. So that company that my dad had grown up with was sold to Namco. And then we started Pinnacle. So he started consulting and we started putting out our own machines,
mm-hmm.
primarily in Walmarts and locations like that. We got a test with Walmart and that grew. And ultimately we had about 500 claw machines and another
Mm-hmm.
couple hundred other games throughout, mostly in the Midwest in the U.S. and then also in Puerto Rico, which also included a family entertainment center that we were partners in.
Oh, wow. Okay. And so then you take that and you grow it. Like you guys are operating it to some degree, right? With these claw machines. Do you,
Yeah,
does
yep.
the consulting spin out of that or in concurrently with that, or where does that kind of
Concurrently,
go?
it was
Okay.
parallel. So I was mostly on the route side then. My dad was consulting. So we started with the very first consulting client was a huge one, which was Disney. So
Mhm.
we were working on downtown Disney in Orlando, which had a good run of over 20 years, just closed a couple of years ago. And then
Mhm.
ESPN Zone. So developing those concepts with Disney. And along the way started working with more mom and pops. And then the company, so eventually we sold the operations
I see.
and folded into a merchandise company called Redemption Plus, which is still around. The idea being if we could help their clients learn the business better, they'd be more successful, they would buy more product and be more loyal.
Mhm.
Did that for years. And then as part of Redemption Plus started working more and more with smaller companies, smaller chains, and bowling has been, came in during that time period. So
Yeah.
about maybe 13 years ago, we started doing like around 2010. I think Andy B's was the first project we worked on in the bowling world
Okay. Yeah, I
um,
was just there.
as a consultant and became part of the Brunswick Alliance. So as we were working with Andy B's and others, we gained a lot of trust with Brunswick.
Yeah.
So they started to recommend us for a lot of their projects. We also work with Cubica, but we've done most of our work with Brunswick due to that alliance. So we work really
Sure.
closely with them. And it's always been something where we just have to take care of their clients and they keep referring us. So
Right.
it's a good relationship. And that's, you know, we've probably done about 200 bowling centers. Whether
Really?
that's some of them are ground up, some of that is modernizations, and everything in between.
Wow. So yeah, that's quite a few. So take me through, what does it look like, I guess, for that journey for you guys? I mean, I think everybody probably has a little bit different starting point, but what's the framework for you guys to say like, hey, here's where you're at today, maybe traditional league house or, closer towards that. What do you do to move them towards that FEC style model?
Well, the first thing is they have to, if you have a house that's 80% league, then you probably shouldn't be messing with anything. We learned that we had one project early on that was like that. They saw like all this stuff going on with FECs, and then they wanted to do it, but they had like 80% league bowling, and it doesn't work nearly as well with league, and it can actually hurt it. But once you start getting to like 50%, or if your leagues are going or declining, which happens to a lot of people, and your open play is getting bigger, when you get to like 50-50 or more than 50% open play, that's when we start looking at the FEC model. So then it usually comes down to if it's an existing center, it depends. We start looking at space. So a lot of them will have like a pool hall that maybe like 1,500 square feet. You could do something small in that. Some will want to do like an addition. A lot take out lanes. If you have a big house, you have 40, 50 lanes or something.
Right.
So we start looking at taking out lanes. And what we want to do is we want to take out enough lanes so that you have enough space. It should be at least 6. Four is very narrow. Yeah. It's hard to do a really nice concept removing 4 lanes if there's not extra space. But at least 6, 8 is also good. And we want to have the lanes be enough that you have about a 2-hour wait on weekends. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Learned that from Andy B, actually. Like you want to remove lanes such to have a wait on the weekend so that you have a decent wait, but not crazy, generally speaking. And then we look at the space and the market, what the competition is, and start to look at, an arcade is the most profitable piece. So we come up with the size of the arcade. And if we have space, we want to add another attraction like laser tag or miniature golf, something like that. We know that it depends on the competition. So if you have like a huge laser tag facility with state-of-the-art laser tag down the street, then you may lean towards mini golf. But Gotcha. Those are the 2 that we look at first.
Okay.
Assuming you don't have a huge place where you're going to do like go-karting tracks or like some kind of mega project. For a typical bowling center, we're looking at mini golf and bowling first, followed by if there's not a lot of space, we'll do like maybe a VR attraction.
Okay. What about like axe throwing or
axe throwing? Yeah, it could be axe throwing if it's more of an adult place.
Gotcha.
Like less families, more adult. Look at axe. Darts. There's some exciting stuff going on with darts.
Yeah,
that we're starting to look at more with some of the 3D darts and digital stuff going on. But I think one important point is we know when looking at arcade sales, they get significantly better when there's another attraction in the space.
I see. So like a bowling anchored arcade versus just pure arcade.
Yeah, we're bowling, arcade, and laser tag. That arcade will do, 40% more than if you just plugged an arcade into a bowling center.
I see. So pairing it with another attraction. What do you think that is?
I think you get more groups. So it allows you to do more parties, more groups, and then that's a good generator for new clients.
I see.
If you think about like if you go to a corporate event, a lot of times you're going to a new place and most of the people there are. So they become new customers if you do a good job.
Right. I see. So you almost have more different activities for people to attach to rather than if you don't like bowling, then it's kind of out of the question. It gives you more opportunities.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. So you said you start with, finding space, whether that's, taking things out or creating space, adding space, switching it out. Then you add in the arcade and then ideally an attraction with that. What's the step after that?
Well, somewhere in there, food and beverage has to be good. So if there's space and capital, we want them to upgrade their food and beverage, at least be on a snack bar. A lot of bowling centers already have a bar and decent food. So the food's important. But I would say somewhere in there, whenever the budget allows, as soon as possible. Right. Really important.
Now, do you look at that as another type of attraction, or is that its own separate thing just because it's a different beast? Or how does that fall in line with the other?
It's its own separate thing. I think of it as a separate business. Like I think of you have the bowling business, which is open play, leagues, shoe rental. You have the food and beverage business, and then you have the family entertainment business. So you kind of have three under that all integrate with each other really nicely, but they're separate businesses.
Right.
And I think that's part of why these models have been working so well, because a lot of the costs are up front. Like if you build a bowling center, the real estate's expensive, the bowling equipment's expensive, the arcade's expensive. But once you have it going, you can drive traffic through that same building through different times of day, different day parts, we call them, during the week. It can get really powerful. And you can do that because you can have corporate and groups during the week. You can have leagues during the week. Mm-hmm. The weekends get packed with parties and open play. But it's the power is filling those daytime slots, which all these things lend themselves to. And that's why, like, these things get very profitable once, after you're paying for your building, that it doesn't take much more in staffing to keep doing higher numbers. So you got a really high margin business.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because I think that's something that a lot of proprietors miss, is that a lot of the profit is just on the other end of the hump, like, because a lot of your costs are fixed. So if you double your revenue, you increase your profit a lot more than just the same ratio. So as you increase that revenue, your profit margin actually goes up, which is contrary to most businesses.
Yeah, it's like a J, it goes way up.
Right. Yeah. And it's just a matter of getting over that initial hump, like you're saying.
Exactly. Yep.
Very cool. So you're saying it's almost like having three different businesses, but you kind of have an economy of scale through having those all three together that works to really make that business take off.
Yeah, and all three lend themselves to multiple generations. If you think about it, like, kids, if you go into a bowling center on a Friday night, you're going to see all generations. You'll see grandparents in there. You'll see younger kids. You'll see, people more our age. And it's fun. Like, same with restaurants, right? Where, everyone likes to eat. Arcades, you can see multiple generations playing in an arcade. You can see multiple generations bowling. So it works for people to do that together, but it also works for you to do it with your peer groups. Like, you want, like, stereotypically, you want the dads going there for Monday Night Football and hanging out with their friends, and then maybe doing a kids party on a Saturday, and then mom does a corporate event, on Wednesday with her team. Some bowling centers even have, like, wine night, ladies' nights with wine. So it's great because all different ages can do it, together socially, but also separately with their friends.
Right. Yes. Something for everything, for everyone. And then you have a much larger TAM, right? Your total addressable market just increases as you get more of these product lines.
Yep.
Very cool. So after that, once you have that, what's the secret then for helping them kind of take over or run it? I mean, obviously it sounds like you guys don't get too far into operations, but you have some knowledge about that. What makes for a really good handoff process once you guys say, all right, you got it all built, here's how you take it and run it?
So what we do is we usually stay with them for at least the first 6 weeks.
Okay.
So if you're thinking about, the arcade has a lot of moving pieces. So we're going to look at, like, the payouts on the games, make sure they're correct. Almost every center now is on a card system, no more tokens. So that card system is so robust. Most proprietors only use it for about 5% of what's possible.
Yeah.
But there's all kinds of KPIs. Like, we want to look at how many tickets are going out of the game versus how many are coming back across the redemption counter. You can find optimizations there to improve people saving. That's basically the difference, right? If only 70% of the tickets that people win from the games get redeemed at the counter, that means that there's a gap there, right? People are saving them or just throwing them away because they don't want to play with them, but a certain chunk are saving them, which you want, because those are the people who keep coming back. So that ratio matters. We show them where to find that, what it might mean, how to find theft. We start teaching the reports to look at employee gameplay. You can see how many tickets as well as play values being given away and who gave it away. I mean, I could sit here all day and talk about stuff, but the main thing is that card system, and what it can do. You can do, like, if you have a group coming in, you can make sure that group, everyone gets a card, and you can give them a bounce back offer. It's like the greatest feature that very few people use. So you can just tell everyone that you're a new customer, to what we were discussing before. Hey, keep the card. Starting tomorrow, you get $10. Come back in. For the next 2 weeks, you get $10 to try and get them to come back. There's all kinds of things that a lot of, like, almost every arcade has, and very few people use it. So we teach them how to use a lot of that stuff. And we have a meeting like every week for at least 6 weeks for an hour to start looking at that stuff and teach them kind of we call it our operating system, how we like to operate and get everything dialed in. And sometimes we'll stay on longer. Some people hire us to stay on for, on an annual basis and do quarterly check-ins and try and help them out.
Yeah, I imagine, especially if they're kind of newer to that game, just because there's so many moving parts.
Yeah.
What card system do you guys use? Do you use a couple of different ones, or you mainly use one over another?
Primarily Intercard. Intercard's been the one that we like the best.
Yeah.
We've used other ones in the past, but that's our go-to.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot you can do with those cards because there's such a margin on them. Like, you can give them away. And, I talked to Brian over at Cats, and he said at one point his marketing strategy was to give away $1 million in game cards just at $10 a pop, and they'd send them out. And he said they always come back in with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just gives you a lot of ability. Cool. So that's a process through, it sounds like you guys take your clients through to kind of get to that FEC destination. I'd love to hear from you a little bit about some of the people who are doing really well today and some of the things that you see them doing. Like, people who are having the best success, what do they have in common, and what could people try to do to emulate that?
Yeah, I think the people who have the best success really treat the FEC side as a business and have somebody who is focused on it, that's in management, and that wants to continuously learn. Because there's a lot of moving parts, like I said, and you can keep getting better at it. There's a lot of people in the bowling world that, make a lot of money and are still leaving money on the table. So it's kind of a tricky thing when someone's making higher profits than they've ever made in any business before in their lives. Right. A lot of times after years and years of running businesses, to tell them, like, you're not really doing that great. Like we're talking about, making obscene profits. Like, yeah, you are, because the model's good. But there's more.
Yeah.
So we find that a lot. But so I think it requires it to be treated like its own business. At one time it was more like with video games, right? There's no payouts, there's no prizes, a lot less moving parts. A lot of the redemption games where you win tickets, like down the clown, like you're throwing a ball, and there's lots of mechanical stuff that breaks. So at one time you could pretty much keep everything clean and let the arcade run and, make a little bit of extra money. But this needs to be its own business.
Yeah. So are you guys primarily, I guess I didn't ask that before, is primarily redemption is mainly what you're looking at?
Yeah. And in redemption, just mechanically keeping things running. Even one of our early clients was Bowl New England, now Spare Time Entertainment. And they've been very successful. We recently started working with them again to, as they keep growing, to start looking at optimizing their facilities. And we find lots of things. And I would put them as one of the better operators, but there's still lots of stuff that we can find. Maintenance issues. Over time, people start to lose keys and, not keep a key program together. There's so many little things that happen. Another thing that is interesting is we're seeing bowling coming into other businesses. So another really strong operator, you have Synergy Entertainment, right? They have movie theaters, and then they have bowling, also arcade and FEC. B&B Theaters, they're one of our clients. Similar, they're I think third generation, could be fourth cinema operator, but they're all their new models that they're building have bowling in it, as well as an arcade and a bar and a restaurant.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple of different guys who own cinemas, and they say they don't want to do any new ones unless it has bowling in it, because you need that, like you were saying earlier, you need that other attraction to be able to bring more people in.
Yeah, well, I think it's a similar concept. Because in a cinema, like if you think you're going to the movies, you're usually just going to the movie and leaving. You're not usually wanting to hang out. If there's an arcade, you might play a few games, but it's like a different psychology. But when you have bowling, especially with a bar and restaurant, then people will go there even when they're not going to the movies. And that's what you want. It can help your movie traffic too, but you want to see people in there hanging out. Like, you still want them going to the movies, of course, but you want them coming, making second and third visits.
Exactly. I mean, it's tough to get in and out of a bowling center in under 2 hours. I mean, realistically, it's not happening. Especially if you throw food in the mix, you're hanging.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you go to see like Guardians of the Galaxy for 3.5 hours, maybe that night you're not going to spend another 2.5 hours in the bowling alley. Some people will, but some people are ready to go home.
Right. Yeah. Well, and another point is that, with Hollywood putting out a lot fewer movies lately, they need something to rely on. That's the guy that I talked to a couple episodes back said that they're beholden to these guys and they're not putting a lot out. So they live or die by these releases and they need something else that they can grab onto.
Yeah. Combined with the fact that the cinemas take on average 57% of that ticket.
Right.
Right. So you buy a movie ticket, the cinema's taken, it's like 80 something in the beginning, it depends, but overall it's like 57%. And They're not taking that off the top from any of the other pieces of the business. Right. Yeah. If you have they're not taking any of the arcade, they're not taking any of the food and beverage, not taking any of the. So.
Yeah. But they have the space and the traffic. So, like we were saying, it's economies of scale for one location, but you have 3 different businesses inside.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, your infrastructure, I guess, is all shared, but your product lines are different.
Yeah.
Very cool. So one thing really quick, going back to what you said about treating it as a separate business, were you saying that you would not want to have some kind of like FEC manager that's separate from some of the other things? Or what were you talking about when you said you wanted to have someone dedicated towards that specific business line?
Yeah, an FEC manager.
Okay.
Absolutely. A lot of times people will take like an hourly employee and kind of put them in charge.
Yeah.
But I think you need someone who's going to be with you for a while that's pretty well paid, assuming that you're at a scale that you can afford it, which most bowling centers are.
Yeah.
You need someone focused on that business.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to be making a huge investment like that, you might as well pay up a little bit extra to get your return out of it.
Exactly. And I think that depending on the size of the chain, you also want your GMs or your district managers or your CEO to at least have some knowledge about what's going on to be able to ask questions. A lot of times it gets left aside. Like they know you find a lot of people that come from bowling and a lot of people that come from food and beverage management, managing these types of centers. And like one of our colleagues who works with us now, Nick DiMatteo, came from Dave & Buster's. They had the same issue at Dave & Buster's. A lot of the GMs come from the food and beverage side. Right. And even though the arcade and the entertainment side is a huge chunk of profits, they don't really know it. Like they know the kitchen inside and out. Right. They know the restaurant inside and out. And then they wind up like at times that the arcade can be left to its own, but you got to have senior management also at least partially focused on it, if that makes sense. Because if they're not focused on it, then it's not important to the GM. So it can have a way of just being left on its own because it can still make a lot of money, like I said before. Sure. And it's like, I have so much to do, I won't mess with that because it's doing fine. It's all automated.
Right, and they don't know how to work it. And I think a lot of it is just that there's a lot fewer of them. I mean, there's more today, but overall, in the grand scheme, if you compare the amount of restaurants that there are out there compared to these types of facilities, it's just a smaller pool to be able to take people from and put them into that management position.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which leads me to the question then, what are you guys doing or seeing for like mechanics? Because I know on bowling, that's a huge issue. Is much of an issue on the FEC side, that, the arcade, and what does that look like today?
Yeah, it is an issue. A seasoned, highly skilled mechanic, can be very expensive. That can be, $70,000+ a year. Right. For a really good top-notch mechanic. And if you have a high-volume facility, it's worth having someone like that.
Right.
So you have a lot of people who are self-taught, which you can only really teach yourself so much, I think. I mean, you can get a good amount if you have someone mechanically inclined. I think that's what we see a lot. You see the locations finding someone mechanically inclined who likes troubleshooting, and then they have there's manuals for all the games and attractions, and then there's a manufacturer and a distributor typically that you can call for help, figure it out, right? So that's the main. That's what we see a lot. I think though that because people can make a good amount of money, I think that's going to get better. There's lots of different groups that are putting out education programs. They're mostly like beginning courses, game distributors, trade associations. But I think that the industries, because they sees the need, is going to keep improving those things. Plus, there's probably some opportunity with technology to do it even better in a more modern sense, using virtual reality and things like that. Some stuff we've been looking at, trying to figure out how to, because there's no substitute, like giving someone a computer course, like it's very hands-on learning. So you got to have a way to have it be hands-on. It works
I
best
see.
with a mentor type program. Like ideally you have that top-notch person that knows everything, that's been doing it a long time, and then they can hire someone under them who can start doing preventative maintenance and fixing smaller things and learn it almost like an apprenticeship. It's tricky in bowling because, a lot of the centers you don't have enough revenue to have like 3 or 4 techs, right? So
Right.
you
Yeah.
got to kind of work with what you have. So that's
Yeah. Well, it seems like the arcade games are almost an entirely different beast, whereas the machines for like the pin setters are pretty mechanical, and they are complicated, but on a to some degree they're not crazy complicated. It seems like there's a lot of electronic components for some of these where it would take a lot to really get good at it. Do you recommend everyone do like some of these training schools, or what do you like? Say you have a new client, what do you do to help them get a good mechanic in place?
we do one of two things. We have them do some of those trainings, like you said. We tell
Mm-hmm.
them like if they have a bowling mechanic and he's willing to do it, that person is usually mechanically inclined enough that they can help oversee it. Sometimes a
Mm-hmm.
facilities manager. So we tell them to do that. Although, that's what we've been doing. And we're finding that, what's been happening in bowling is the arcades do well. So they keep expanding and they're getting bigger, and that's harder to manage them. So we're
Mm-hmm.
starting to look at how to have some regional techs and starting to try to set up some regional tech resources that you can bring and help.
Yeah.
Some of the Schaefer Distributing is the distributor we like to use. They do training, and they'll even come on site for locations and do some training.
Yeah.
They have limited bandwidth, so they can't do it as much as they'd like to. So I wish I had this is exactly how you do it. This is the greatest answer, but it's an issue.
Right.
That
Yeah.
we're actively trying to optimize and figure out the best way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's gotten so bad on the bowling side that they're changing the pin. A lot of people are switching to string machines because of they can't get a mechanic. It's changing the game.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's a big reason. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I would say that's a big, from what I've heard, was a large contributing factor to the fact that strings got sanctioned this year. It's just because they're like, hey, can't get mechanics. We have to go string or we're going to go out of business.
Yeah, I believe it. I had it's like a side note. I had an Uber driver when I was in Las Vegas for one of the trade shows. And he was saying that he used to work for Namco as an arcade game tech. And then he worked for, I forget, one of the big bowling, Las Vegas has those mega bowling centers. He worked for one of them as like I forget, they had different levels of techs for the bowling equipment, but he was like a senior bowling tech. And then he's driving Uber. I'm like, if you can if you can work on the mechanical pin setters and you're a master arcade tech, like you can probably get a really high paid job.
Oh yeah.
Like, out in Vegas, you probably make close to $100,000 a year if you want
easily.
to. He's like, my back. Right. I don't want to do it anymore. I'm like, all right. I'm like, there's not that many guys or girls who can do both of those at a high level.
But yeah, it is a tough gig. It's hard, and a lot of these guys are older and they have a tough time doing it sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so Howard, I know we're coming up close to time. I was hoping to ask you two more things. One is maybe one more example or commonality you see of people who are doing really well in the FEC world. And then the second thing, love to get your outlook on maybe the next 12, 18 months where you see things going. So we can start first with, another success story or commonality of your highest performing clients.
Yeah. I think the summit out in Denver, Don McClain's group.
Yeah.
They sold the main event. But one thing, when I was out there meeting with him, I remember Don saying, like, the most important thing is that you train people well and take care of them. A lot of the employees are new, it's their first job or second job. And he was like, I don't believe like a lot of this, like the millennials don't want to work stuff. He's like, I don't believe that. Like it's like anyone else, but you have to have good training. So I think people who have a training program for their employees can keep employees longer, and you can do a lot better with good employees, of course.
Yeah.
Sometimes people will treat them because they don't get paid well. They'll just treat them like they're temporary and they're going to turn over in 6 months anyway and churn through. And that's very costly. So I think treating employees well and having a good training program, like people who do that are a cut above for sure.
Yeah, you want to talk about some alpha on the table, right? To be able to invest in someone and get them to go from that first job to being like an A player There's a huge gain to be had in that, right? If you have the ability to invest in people, even just with, like you said, a little bit with good training, it's a huge win for the business to be able to create A players at will because you have the right mindset.
Yeah. And some of them may wind up doing it as a career. Or if you get someone in high school who's really good and train them, well, while they're in college, they can come in the summer and fill in when people want to take vacation. They're probably going to be home at spring break when you're going to be busy, and you don't have to train someone to work for a week when it's spring break because they're already there and know what they're doing. Same thing with Christmas break. So, there's a very practical component of it too, that you can, keep people for a long time, maybe multiple years, even if it's only on their breaks from college, if they're a college student.
Sure. Yeah. I think that, churn and, low retention is probably the largest hidden cost that isn't on a P&L that should be.
Yeah. Yeah. It is for some people. Some people put a number to that and track. Most don't, but some do.
Yeah, because it's one of those sneaky costs where it gets used in extra labor, but it's really, if you could have fixed that hole in the bucket, you could reduce that significantly.
Yeah.
I see.
And when you're training someone, they're really not helping you that much, right? That's a cost.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so when you churn, you're just getting that, you're paying that over and over. You never stop paying that.
Right.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So I want to go through the last piece, Howard, that we like to talk about is kind of maybe where you see things going. Maybe the next 12, 18 months, where you see the industry going, maybe where you guys are going. Love to hear your outlook.
Yeah. So I think two things. I think you'll see bowling coming into more and more projects. We have the advantage that we work with hotels and casinos and movie theaters, and more bowling is a piece of that, especially with the duck pin concepts. They are smaller footprint. You can fit them in more locations, and they can be really profitable. So I think you're going to see bowling in more and more. It's very social, like not league type stuff, but you'll see bowling components of more and more entertainment concepts for sure. I know that because we usually start in the planning stage, so we see things a couple of years before they happen.
Right.
So we'll see a lot of that. I think that you're also going to see more of the smaller chains, like maybe chains that have gone from 1 to 5 or 10 or 20 locations, are going to really dial into their operations. Like that's our fastest growing piece of business, is people who want us to help them manage, as they realize, like, okay, we've been doing this for a while, we're making money, but we know we're not optimized. Because as you're growing, you're focusing on new stores, and it's a lot. And then you start to let the managers, like individual locations, do things their own way. And there's advantages to being a corporate. Like, you can buy and scale. Like in game, you can be very strategic in how you buy games and rotate them through locations. There's a lot of things that from even a small chain you can do to increase your profits. And then we're fortunate that we have that. Nick's got the Dave and Buster's experience, and my dad and I have our corporate chain management experience that we can help people think through some of that.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to see you'll see a lot of the proprietors, especially like if the economy's softening a little bit. It looks like, from what I see, we get about 100 locations numbers every week, and the growth has been off the chart, and it's kind of steadying out, dipping a little bit. Still great, like, you know what I mean, like coming down or staying even from record profits is good,
right?
As long as you're not blowing all the money. But I think people are going to refocus on optimizing what they have, but the future is really bright. I mean, this is for arcade, and it's definitely the best. Like, my dad's almost 70, so he's been doing it for 45 years or something, and he always says that, like, this is the golden age for arcades. People think of it as the 80s, but now is the best time ever. And I think with bowling too, there was a stat, I think it was 2017, Brunswick was saying that year there was a record number of bowling centers closing and a record number of new builds. So the model's evolving, but it's still really good. And they're still, I do think people will focus on improving their operations, but I'm not seeing growth slow down. I mean, maybe with the interest rates are a lot higher, everything's gotten expensive, we may see some slowdown. But I think the future is really bright for the next 12 to 18 months. Yeah,
I mean, bowling is relatively, inexpensive as far as activities. You're going to cut your fine dining before you do your family entertainment cheap, bowling. But it sounds like, if I were to have two takeaways, it sounds like polling and FEC is a great, well-kept secret that's becoming less so a kept secret. It sounds like more competition entering the field, but still in a growing pie.
Yeah, absolutely. I think and you'll see more consolidation. Obviously, Bolero's buying a lot of centers.
Right.
You have groups like 5-Star Group, Triple Shift Entertainment that are buying centers. So there'll be some consolidation too in the industry. You'll have, you'll have some more bigger play running chains, but there's still a lot of room for mom and pops.
Right. Yeah, and it sounds like also maybe with the softening, they're going to take you up on some of the things that they could be doing to improve their operations, right? You said there's a lot of things they're doing well, and they've been having record profits every year, but now maybe with the leveling off, they'll come back to you and say, oh, maybe I should do some of those things for
I got a text on Saturday at like 8:00 at night. Hey, you are really needed and wanted. Can we have a phone call, please? And then I talked to him and he's like, I lost my arcade manager a few months ago, and it's just kind of chugging along. It's like, I know we can be doing better. Like, can you help us out? Like,
right.
I've been getting more and more calls like that, which is good.
That's great. Yeah, that's what you guys are here for. A lot of times, right, we don't make those hard decisions until we have to.
Right.
Awesome. Howard, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been an awesome conversation. We could talk this stuff all day, but I want to be respectful of your time. For the people who are interested in your group, and maybe if they want consulting or to learn more about what you guys do, where should we send them, or where can they find out more?
So my cell phone's 314-378-4522. You can always call me. And our website's Group Pinnacle, GROUPIN, like Nancy, ACLE.com. And you can see like lots of different projects we've worked on and more information. And you can get our contact info there. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I looked through it. There's a lot of big name testimonials on there. You guys, obviously have a great track record to back up what you're talking about.
Yeah, most of our business comes from referrals. We don't do a lot of marketing, but that's good too.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, well, thanks again so much for coming on, Howard. This has been a pleasure. Absolute blast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day.
Yeah, and thanks for reaching out. I appreciate you having me on. It's been good.
Yeah. Thanks. I'll hopefully see you at one of these events soon.
Definitely.